So, first of all, let me introduce you to my audience. This is David Miller, Amazon seller lawyer specializing in brand protection and intellectual property complaints. And today I would like to raise one very interesting topic. And I want you to ask you, David, about to discuss with you some policies regarding Amazon listing violations. Because, according to Amazon, we are not allowed to change or to modify the brand name on an existing listing, right? But however, there have been numerous, instances where the brand name was changed on an existing listing with an actually registered trademark. So I guess it's quite illegal. And I would like to have your professional opinion on this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a big problem with brands and other sellers manipulating specific details on listings, as you alluded to. So essentially what sellers should do that own their own brand, that register for trademarks, is of course enroll in brand registry. And that of course gives more leeway. You have a little bit more protection as far as, what you can and can't enforce. So that's advantageous to a lot of sellers. Now, that's not necessarily foolproof. There are ways where there are some black hat tactics out there, and there are hijackers that have found, loopholes in Amazon's system to change listing details. And then sometimes they'll almost accuse the brand owner of, committing some sort of Amazon violation, even though it wasn't really them at all. And essentially, even, to add to that point, what we're seeing now is an increase in those situations arising, and what it's causing brand owners to file IP complaints against the hijackers. That in and of itself is essentially causing Amazon to flag the brand owners for filing inaccurate IP claims.
Yes.
And I think there's lots of reasons. I'm not sure if you've seen any uptick in that, but I've seen, I think, more of it than I've ever seen within the last couple of months. I haven't seen in the past several years as many issues with brand registry privileges, but I've seen more and more of that. And usually I don't think it's malicious. I think most of the time it's just a brand owner trying to protect their private label, and they file complaints against hijackers. And Amazon either doesn't like what they're claiming. Sometimes sellers are confused between a counterfeit claim and what trademark infringement is. So they might accuse someone of counterfeit, and it might not necessarily be counterfeit. Maybe they don't have the appropriate proof to present. But there are, I think, a slew of different issues that are causing, brand, small private label brands to run into, these sorts of issues. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's it's kind of what we're seeing, at least as of right now.
Okay, but for example, if we are talking about a wholesale business model or arbitrage business model where the sellers don't have registered trademark, like actually
Right.
One is selling it under the same listing, without registered trademark. So basically Amazon says that this listing belongs to Amazon. So if you want to own this listing, you have to register the trademark. Am I right?
Correct. That's correct.
I remember we had some cases like this, like for example, that the brand name was changed and the trademark wasn't registered. So after contacting Amazon support, actually regarding this matter, actually Amazon revert this listing back, to the previous brand name, but sometimes not. How is it actually possible?
Yes, that's a great question. I wish I had a simple answer, but just to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned owning a listing. No one really owns a listing. You can own a private label. You can be enrolled in brand registry, but no one really owns it. So based on Amazon policy, if you're selling that exact product, anyone has free reign to join the listing, even if you don't want them to, even if they're selling, let's say, below MAP pricing. So there are a few different examples of that. As far as just blatant listing tactics or, brand names when sellers are having a hard time with, let's say they join a listing and someone manipulates those details. And I've seen that happen. And then what the person or the company that changed the details will then file complaints or, some sort of black hat tactic against other sellers. Now, the only real way to resolve that is to contact seller support and get them to change specific listings. But it can certainly be a bit of a pain. So I think what sellers really have to do is just be on the lookout for those listing changes, because very often when that does happen, there's a good chance that you might get some sort of complaint. And then when Amazon says that your product doesn't match the listing details, then your response is, wait a second, the listing details were changed, So then it's a matter of providing the appropriate proof. So what I do is use some of the listing history. So if you sold a product on that listing before, and let's say the title at the time matched your product, you want to use that when contacting seller support or contacting account health to provide proof that it actually did match the product at some, a certain point in time.
So it may help sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
So basically, I have to do some maybe screenshot, about what brand before, So okay. But how can we actually be precautious maybe before start to list our products at the particular listing? Are there any ways?
Sure. So there are a few different ways. You can't really prevent somebody from changing the details. So I'm going to assume that for this example that we're just talking about a reseller, right? So someone just buying and reselling branded products. So you don't have a lot of control, which causes lots of issues. When something like that happens, or something to look out for, rather, I should say, the first thing that's the most important is to make sure that you're joining the correct listing to begin with. I find that a lot of times it's not the case. And sometimes listings look very similar. Just yesterday or within the last few days, I saw a seller who joined, which on its face looked like, an accurate listing. The photos look legitimate, but then underneath the title, it said brand, and then it said generic. Okay. Based on the title, based on the photographs, it was not a generic brand. In this sort of scenario, it was really a duplicate listing. So this exact product already existed in Amazon's catalog, and Amazon wants you to join the original listing. What ended up happening? They were accused of selling products that did not match the brand name. Okay, so we had to contact Amazon and basically walk them through why that's not accurate, where it was more of just a listing issue that they joined the wrong listing, which Amazon also wants you to be responsible for. So the first thing I would say is double and triple check that you're joining the correct listing. So that's not just the photographs look the same. I'm talking UPC numbers, make sure the size is accurate, the quantities match, obviously the brand name, make sure the packaging is updated, for example, even if it's the same product, but a certain company updated their packaging within the last 6 months. If you sell a product that doesn't match it, you might run into problems. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really just monitoring, which can be, of course, a lot tougher when you're trying to scale. Like sellers don't have the time to watch, hundreds of listings at the same time, of course. But it's really just, if you have a team member that at least can scan for potential problems. Usually it's related to, a negative review. If you have a couple, I wouldn't, 1 or 2 is not the end of the world, but it's something to look out for. It's like, wait a second, why am I receiving this? If someone wrote inauthentic, if someone wrote, oh, the product doesn't match exactly, that's not something to ignore. That's something to say, okay, is this the customer is not being truthful? Are they mistaken? Or maybe there is something that's not right here. So those are, I think, more preventative measures. And again, you're not going to prevent someone from changing the listing details. It's impossible to a certain extent, right? But if you're more careful with what you join to begin with, it's less likely to happen, I would say, because Amazon doesn't usually just give anyone free reign to change those details, but it does happen from time to time. So all you can do is really just try and be as preventative as you can. So that's what I would suggest.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. You mentioned some copyrights. Yeah, like for example, if I do private label, and I noticed that a few sellers started to, they created the same listing with selling the same product. What rights do I have, or what I have to do? Like I have to contact Amazon first, or I have to contact like lawyers in this case.
Sure. So if you have copyright rights, right? So there's different perspectives on or perceptions really about the rights that someone actually specifically has, right? So you receive copyright protection when you create a work, right? So if you write a book, for example, you have copyright in that book when it's written. You don't have copyright in it after it's actually registered. Now, with that being said, there are lots of benefits to registering your copyright. One of the many is when you're selling on an e-commerce platform like Amazon, you have a registration number, so you have proof that the copyright exists. Without that, it's way more difficult to prove, and it's harder to actually file complaints. So when an original work is created, that can be a book, it can be a painting, it can be some sort of original design, it can be a drawing, you have protection.
Yeah.
What's that?
Or even listing, right?
Listings? Oh yeah, like listing descriptions? Yes. Yeah. So in terms of, go ahead. What was that?
And also listing like pictures also can be.
Correct. So the two most common with Amazon are photographs and verbiage. So verbiage as far as, product listing descriptions, it could be an instruction manual. Those are the two most common, right? So you have copyright protection when that's created. So when you take a photograph or you create that, original description. So if someone blatantly copies and pastes it, copies your photograph, creates their own listing and uses it, or the same thing with the description, you can file copyright complaints. So usually what the process is we send out cease and desist letters to those infringing parties to inform them of the infringement, because sometimes sellers just don't really know and they will comply with the letter. And in the rare instances that they don't, you can always file reports of infringement. And that's typically easiest when you have a copyright registration. And to do that, you have to file with the US Copyright Office or wherever, whichever country you are in. Most of the countries around the world work with each other. It's something called the Berne Convention. I'm pretty sure Turkey's on that list, but what that essentially means is if you have a copyright in the US, if Turkey is in the Berne Convention, we can enforce the US copyright also in Turkey. So a registration only takes usually on average about 3 to 4 months as far as copyright registration, and it just becomes that much easier to protect yourself when you're dealing with a copyright infringer.
Yeah, it's actually not a long time, 3, 4, 5 months. So that's nice. Also, I would like to ask you about patents, like design patents. So it's kind of similar maybe to copyrights. I mean, like if I have to protect my design. So does it actually worth it? Does it worth it to have design patents to be able to sell on Amazon?
Is it worth it?
Yeah.
So in general, I would say yes. They've been heavily critiqued over the years, I would say, design patents, because they don't provide a ton of protection. They're fairly simple to get. I think about the last time I looked at the statistics, about 90% of design patent applications were accepted, whereas 90% of utility patents were rejected. So you can kind of do with that what you will, right? So that would essentially say that design patents are a lot easier to get. They're also a lot cheaper, and there's not a ton of protection. Like you can tweak a design minimally and get around design patents. So, some people don't think that they're necessarily worth it. Very different than utility patents, but it's as simple as if you have a work that is patentable, the more intellectual property rights that you have, usually the better spot you'll be in. So it depends on, what type of product that it is, if it's even patentable to begin with. But if you're doing a large amount of volume and it is a new, unique design that is patentable and copyrightable, having copyright and design patent protection is really only going to help. Now, if there's not enough volume in it, it may not make sense to even go through the expense or take the time to actually file for it. But in general, as an IP lawyer, of course, I'm always going to say that the more IP you have, the better, because it's just there's more teeth to what we have behind. Without any sort of protection, it's that much harder to enforce.
For sure, especially with Amazon, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, then. Okay, thank you so much. That's all my questions I would like to erase today. So thank you for your time, and also all of you who are interested in David's services, you can contact. I will share the link with you below in the description. And David, I will stop this recording also, yeah?